You're listening to Blue Collar CEO, the podcast that's all about helping you build a better, more profitable, and more sustainable home service business. Each week, we'll cover a different topic that will help enable your company to move forward to success. And here's your host, Ryan Redding.
What is up, Blue Collar CEOs? It's Ryan, and it is so stinking good to be with you today. Hope you're doing well. Hope the year's treating you well. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm really amped about introducing you to Monique. Monique Allen, you may or may not know of her yet. She comes from the landscaping world. She's the founder and creative director of the Garden Continuum. She's a master creator, interactive employer, published author. She's a fierce industry advocate. And over the past 3 decades, she's witnessed the landscape trade, because that's her background, become extremely popular and commoditized, which has eroded the sustainability of landscapes, undermined our ability to feel satisfaction with them, the whole thing. And as a founder of the Lifescape Method, she's a lifelong gardener, a business developer, and educator. She's dedicated her career to reversing that legacy by creating alternative approaches to sharing actionable information to spread a positive message about how we can all improve our land, our lives, our professional satisfaction through what she calls lifescaping and compassionate business building. This is a really refreshing conversation that I absolutely encourage you to tune into, even if you're not from landscaping. If you're plumbing, HVAC, electrical, pest control, there are so many things that she talks about that I think are really valuable and missing from our world in the business conversation today. And yeah, you're going to want to listen to a few times. So I'll shut up. I'm going to introduce you to Monique. Let's get going. Monique, I have been looking forward to having you on the show for quite a while now, because I think we first heard about you several months ago, and the schedule just didn't work out. And so here we are. So glad we were able to make it happen. But for those who maybe don't yet know who you are, can we just take a second and stop there? Because you do some really cool things. Who are you? What do you do?
Okay, my name's Monique Allen, and I live in Massachusetts. I own a landscape design, build, and fine gardening firm. I have been doing this since my late teenage years, and I'm close to 40 years doing it. So y'all can do the math. I'm also a business coach, and I focus on working with the trades, because I grew up in HVAC. That was the family business, and refrigeration, commercial refrigeration. My father's an immigrant from Syria, and so, I learned trade life very early, and much to my father's chagrin, I wasn't interested in HVAC and refrigeration. So I fell in love with the land. I fell in love with plants, and I've been working in design and sustainable development for a lifetime. I wrote a book called Stop Landscaping, Start Lifescaping, because I wanted to do a paradigm shift where we could focus a little bit more on triple bottom line profit, so triple bottom line being like concern for the planet, for people, as well as for profit. And so that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. So, well, one, what a background. Can we, I did not expect to take a detour so quick, but the triple bottom line is such an interesting idea that you just rattled through. And I don't want to forget to come back to it, because it's such an interesting idea. Can you unpack a little bit more of what you mean by that? Because it sounds like a beautiful notion. And honestly, in some ways, it sounds like, yeah, I'm going to shut up. Say more about what you mean, because it sounds like there's a lot in that.
Okay. So the idea of a triple bottom line is to measure your business against more than the metric of money. And I've, this has been a challenge. This isn't an easy thing. Profit has never really been my motive. Like, my motive has been certainly to make sure that I make enough money and my team makes enough money and we pay all our bills, and we're, not big on a lot of debt, so I'm very smart about that. But like, having a big bucket of bills at the end isn't the goal. The goal was like, how do you leave a place better than you came to it? The goal is, how do you normalize separation with people, so people can come in and work and then they can leave, and you normalize that so that you build relationships and don't destroy relationships. Because what I had been seeing, being so early in the landscape industry in the 80s, I was seeing a lot of land destruction. Construction is land destruction. And
Yeah, and it's more. I think it's interesting. I think it's even more than landscaping. I think that's especially in the '80s in the U.S. That's like a consumeristic sort of capitalism based motive, right? Like you consume the max you can. Employees
Yep.
are meant to be consumed and expelled. Like it's all about the profit at all cost. So it's
Right.
interesting that you're seeing like that destruction and like trying to do something different with that.
Yeah, and it's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Because we know the framework. We know, we can follow profit first. There's so many methodologies that we can follow to guide ourselves using money as the metric. And it's important. And I have not done a good job myself at caring about profit enough. But what I have cared for very deeply is not being heavily in debt, being well paid, having my staff well paid, my staff well benefited, well trained. These are all investments, right? So money comes out of the profit bucket and goes into that investment. But all of that is for naught if we don't have a planet to live on, right? And I'm
Right.
not overly altruistic where I want to save the planet at all costs, right? I don't even have that skill set. But what I can do is I can say to myself, if I'm going to go into a property and I'm going to be part of a construction project, and I mean from top to bottom, right? From the foundation to the house to all of the utilities, HVAC included, like everything, right? We can look at a piece of land and say, how do we come in surgically? Like we don't go into the body and rip it apart and put our elbows all in it. Like we go in surgically. We're clean. We know that we're creating harm, but the goal is to do no harm. So, how can we do that in construction? And so that was very important to me on the planet side, and then not burning through human beings. Literally, like the landscape industry, I'm not sure if it's the same in the HVAC industry, but in the landscape industry, it's this ridiculous revolving door of burning through staff. And I wanted to figure out how could I keep staff for a longer period of time so that the investment of my training was valuable. And if they went out into the world, how would I make sure that they actually were contributing to the landscape industry in a positive way? Um, and then the profit piece, that's vigilance. Ruth King is amazing on all of that.
She
It's really
totally
just the
is.
vigilance around those numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. It's almost like I don't know if you would agree with this. It's almost like hearing you say your primary concern tends to be stewarding the environment and stewarding your relationship with other people, with other humans. And as a result of that stewardship, the profit comes. Not that it's like accidentally there, not that it does require an amount of work, but profit isn't the primary driver. Profit is the result of you stewarding those things well. Would you agree with that?
I would agree that if we looked at a Venn diagram and we took the three planet, people, and profits, and we overlaid them in that trinity, that sweet spot is in the center.
Hmm.
And like anything that's, if you think of that center, being a fulcrum, and we're on that fulcrum, and we're leaning into the planet.
There's
Oops, I
like a
got to
sense
lean
of
into the people.
balance you're
Whoops, I
looking
got to
for.
lean into.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're doing this dance, and I'm actually in a point. When you asked me how's the new year starting, I'm like, well, it's a new year, and I'm doing new things. I'm pivoting this year. I'm doing a big pivot. I made a big change last year that was necessary. I had to like break a part of my company in order to figure out how to make this change because I couldn't make an appreciable enough change just tweaking on the inside. So we not only need to normalize the fact that people come through our companies, we have to normalize the fact that we grow, we plateau, we scale, we plateau, we grow, we scale. Like we're not doing all those things all the times. And I have found that sometimes I slide down the mountain a little bit. Like I go from plateau and like I backpedal, I got to break something and get off of something so I can change my tack and go a different way. And I'm trying to understand that balance, that ability to be nimble in the way we innovate in our companies. And if our eye is always on the profit ball, we get so afraid of our profit sliding that we don't do something creative, to change the way our revenue comes in a An example of that would be several years ago, before the pandemic, I decided I wanted to reduce my carbon footprint.
Okay.
And, we have a lot of big trucks,
Mhm.
diesels, gasoline, we've got, equipment, and we're creating a lot of CO2. So I thought, well, I'm not mechanical enough to run my trucks on donut grease. I don't know how to do that. So how could I reduce my footprint? I don't have the capital to change everything to electric, and that's not that the technology wasn't even there. So what could I do? I thought to myself, well, I could drive less. How would I drive less? Landscapers, I don't know if it's like this in HVAC, but if I work for one client and they refer me to another client and that other client is 11 towns over, I have to decide where I'm going to make the 11 town
Right.
jump.
Right. Yeah.
And so I end up driving. Well, if I spent my time and money on marketing so that I could be hyper local, could I reduce my carbon footprint? We've reduced our fuel consumption by 2/3.
Yeah. That's crazy.
By 2/3. I
That's
have
crazy.
50% of all my work in one town.
That's crazy.
And that was an intention. And the way I had to do it is literally lop off hundreds of thousands of dollars of clientele, because I had to do it in stages, but I had to decide this town we don't work in anymore. Get rid of
Yeah.
all those clients. This town I don't work anymore. Get rid of all those clients. So intentionality about the way you're driving your business can't always be focused on the monetary metric. I believe there has to be bigger meaning.
Yeah. And I think I would agree. And I would probably make the argument. I remember, gosh, years ago when I was working on my MBA, there was this kind of, at the time, this kind of relatively new movement on being more conscious about how businesses were interacting with communities, with the environment at large. So an obvious example that a lot of people may or may not know is Apple. Apple over the past several years has made very intentional, very dramatic and obvious efforts to reduce their carbon footprint, not only from their new campuses they built, but also their products, right? They're trying to get to a net zero carbon footprint. And they're in a really difficult industry to do that in, because they're mining rare earth minerals out of the earth. Like there's a lot that goes into making a smart device. But that's a big part of the thing, not just the packaging, not just minimalizing ink, but they're making very dramatic efforts. And it seems like a lot of larger companies are making those sort of changes. But it's weird. Now I'm saying this out loud, and I'm saying, like, it's on one hand, I would say it's laudable for companies who are mindful and conscious of how they're interacting with other humans and other communities and the environment at large. But at the same time, there's often a resentment, I would say, against like government regulation imposing those sort of requirements on them, of imposing that sort of statute. Do you feel to what degree do you feel that because you choose it on your own versus a government compliance or regulation requiring a change of action, do you feel like it makes the adoption for your team easier? Does it make anything like that more palatable because it's something you choose rather than something you're required to do? I don't even know if that question makes sense.
It makes so much sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I'm just going to jump into a story.
Go.
So
Story time.
a story about this is that in the landscape industry, and we see this, where are you out of again?
I'm in Denver.
You're in Denver. Okay.
Yeah.
So all through the United States, this is happening. So I don't know if it's happening there, but ordinances for, noise ordinances, and in particular, blowers, landscape blowers.
Yeah.
There's legislation all over the place about whether you can or can't use them. The issue we've got is that the state won't decide. And so towns are deciding town by town. So if I go to town 1 and I use a blower, it's allowed. If I go to town 2, it may or may not be allowed. There may be hours of operation. There may be decibel levels. There may be gas versus electric. So I understand the value of, or the values of the people who are trying to push these ordinances forward. The problem is when you build confusion into the system, you can't scale it.
Oh, well said. That's a good point.
Right. And so when it becomes complex, people just are like, what the?
Yeah.
I get it. Right.
Yeah. Good point.
So we have to, I think that slapping rules down. And this also happens in a company. When we say to people in a company, leave your phone in the truck, you can never have a phone. Well, we're a culture of phones attached to us. So we have to, or another one was like putting an earbud in. And for safety, we don't want people with two in. A lot of company owners will be like, I don't want people listening to music. I used to be one of those. It's ridiculous because we're forcing people into behaviors that don't feel in alignment with them. So somebody might be very, very aligned with the fact that at 7 o'clock in the morning, if they don't have to get up till 8, the last thing they want to hear is a bunch of blowers on a Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get people on the same page of thinking and using critical thinking rather than just forcing people into legislative rules? I worked in legislation for a really long time, and about 20 years, and it was constantly those kinds of things. The noise bothers me, let's ban the noise. The smell bothers me, let's ban the smell. It's like, yeah, but you're generally not going to get compliance, and you're not thinking from the contractor's point of view. Contractors work very, very hard, and they don't always know that what they're doing is disruptive. So we have to help them understand the disruptiveness and then give them the opportunity to work on solutions that are best for them to mitigate the disruptiveness. But if you want someone to come and clean your yard and you want it to be at a price point that you can handle, you better let them use a blower, because a rake takes a really long time.
It's almost like you're proposing embracing mindfulness more than compliance, which I find super refreshing. Like that's an uncommon position. I love it.
Yeah. Yes. And I honestly believe that when we take the time, it is absolutely possible to teach these things. It's when we do things peripherally, like telling, barking orders, whatever, throwing SOPs at people, rather than unpacking it. They say there's 4 learning styles, right? You need to be able to articulate why, you need to be able to articulate how, what, and the if. If you don't, then what? If you do, then what? And people come at their learning from all 4 of these directions. We generally all use all 4 of them, but some people tend to be real why people. Some people tend to be real how people. So you've got to look at it from all those angles, and that takes time, and it takes a commitment to people.
Yeah. I want to talk about the commitment to people, because so much about what you're talking about really does orbit around other humans that are embracing you on the business that you're building and creating. And it's even though it's landscaping, you're doing it in an unconventional way, or at least unconventional by a lot of standards, right? You're doing it with the best intention of the communities that you're serving. So you're being very thoughtful, very diligent, very mindful about how you're interacting with your customer base. Tell me a bit about, like, how do you in an economy and in an industry where so many people are struggling to find anybody with a pulse to do any sort of job, how on earth are you able to surround yourself with humans who believe not just on the why and the how, but they're willing to do this sort of like mindful sort of exercise into helping do exceptional work, take care of stewarding the environment, and also like take care of the people that are doing that work, and also that they're doing that work for? How do you find people to surround yourself with that share those things?
That's a huge question, and it's a really good one. There isn't a linear answer. The answer is probably a constellation of activities. The first being, as an owner, it's really, really important to understand why you're in business. Why is the existence of your company important? Why? Do we need another HVAC company? Do we need another landscape company? Like, why? What is your why? That I think is critically important. Then you have to be able to package that into a story that people can relate with. And I don't mean all people. I just mean the right people, the people in proximity, the people in need, the people who are in alignment. I don't know who it is. I think it might be the Story brand or something that says, this idea of like 10,000 followers, or, 1 million followers. Nobody needs that. If you have if you have 1,000 people who pay attention to what you do and who care about what you do and why you do it and how you do it, and care about if you don't do it anymore, what does that mean for them?
Right.
That's a cool story.
Yeah.
And
really
can you
is.
write that story about yourself?
Yeah.
I think about, people say, oh, I'm boring, or the work I do is boring. You know what? All work has value and all human beings are interesting. So it's part of what I do with people is help them to cull through what is valuable about what they do, what problem do they solve, and what's their differentiation point, and then how are they personally unique and interesting. That makes for a compelling story. Most people want to work for somebody. Even though we've had this glut of entrepreneurship, everybody and their brother thinking that they can open a business, the truth is that business owners are a small percentage.
Mm-hmm.
And so most people want to work for somebody. They just don't want to work for an asshole.
Who knew?
Right? They don't want to, right? They want to work for somebody who cares about something more than themselves and the bucket of profit. So I think that part of that next tier is, what is it that you care about as an owner that other people could help you care about that thing and make impact? And the funny thing is, we may think what we do is HVAC, or we think what we do is gardening, but really what we're doing is we're making home life comfortable, right?
Yeah,
we're making the ability to be in comfort possible. And we care that human beings are in comfort. So I think all of that gets woven together to create your company story. And then your company story has to be put in a lot of different places, whether it's your website, your Facebook page, your socials, up on Indeed, ZipRecruiter. Those things, because people will work for money. They want to work for money, but they don't want to work for jerks. They don't want to, they want to do things that they're proud of.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about how you're even framing all these is you are couching it in the concept of a story. And that is 100%. You mentioned story brand earlier. That is 100% like a Donald Miller-ism about people historically communicate through story, through songs, through poems, like going back to religious literature for thousands of years. Those are the stories we have identities with, of who we belong to, of why we do certain things and why we orient to certain values. Those are stories. And I think a lot of companies focus on hiring, like say, hire us because we're the fastest, or hire us because we're the cheapest, or hire us because whatever, right? Pick a superlative that they think makes them stand out. In reality, totally 100% of the time, people gravitate to the story. Can they see themselves in that story? Is that a story that compels them? And what's interesting as a byproduct of that, and you alluded to this, is that you essentially segment the market based on not are they a customer or not, but do they share that same story narrative or not, right? So it makes business so much easier when you have customers who get you and you get them. Like everything's so much easier when you have that unifying story throughout.
Yeah, it's making me think of, when you think about your brand or your story, you're always trying to answer the question, why would somebody hire you?
Mm-hmm.
Why would somebody work for you?
Mm-hmm.
Why would somebody hire your brand, your story? Why would somebody want to work for your brand or your story, or be part of your story, be a character in that story? And I think that we want connection, we want camaraderie. We spend a lot of time at work.
Mm-hmm.
So I am really, really interested in team dynamics and finding people who want to learn, who want to expand, but also people who are really, really happy, like they're very, very clear about their domain and they want to kind of stay there. They're happy with that. It took me a long time to realize that some people don't have hyper growth ambition like me. They actually are really happy with the known, right?
Yeah.
The comfort of the known. So I think making space for that continuum of personality type as your employee is also important. And benefits are important, perks are important. kind of that value add, like what's the culture you're building, all of that is important. It's kind of like marketing, right? You never know, like, what's the one marketing piece that got you that new client? Well, all of them.
Yeah. This is so interesting in your experience, and I know you work with other companies to kind of help navigate this and start crafting their. I don't know if you'd say like you help craft their why, but you definitely do probably channel into their why and help them clarify it so they can start building to it. What do you feel like is one of the most like pivotal sort of ahas that you or companies you've worked with have had to go through to get that sort of clarity?
A big part of it that I find often, most people who come to me with their hair on fire, right? So they're at that hair on fire point. So we're doing a little bit of triage in the beginning to kind of like calm the situation. Things that I see that are common is that the dynamics of the team are toxic. There's something going on in the team dynamic that has been going on for a long time that's toxic. I have to say that probably half of the people that I've coached over time, over this decade, have let somebody go after we worked together, or have decided that there was going to be a separation because you've got, people pulling in different directions and causing this rift and tear. So I think that's really common, is that when you can bring in an outside set of eyes and you begin to look at the dynamics of the team, you see that there are some real problems. And toxicity doesn't always mean that there's an evil villain. It just means that resentment has been festering or something has been going on for a long time, that the rift is beyond repair. And separation is better. So that's a big aha. And the interesting thing that I've seen when that happens is you usually see somebody kind of in the lower tier just rise up, like fast, just rise up and is capable.
Crazy how that works, isn't it?
It really is. The other one that I see is a personal limiting belief that comes from the owner, and it can be a multiple things, right? From being afraid to price reasonably or correctly, being afraid to give estimates because really thinking with their own wallet as opposed to thinking with the wallet of the clientele. Trying to make that change. People thinking that sales is icky, and really trying to get through that piece. And then also a very commonly recurring belief that I don't know enough yet. So I always have to couch everything I say with the client knows best. And what I say to a lot of people is, no, they don't. I mean, they don't. They don't know your business. They don't know my business. Yeah, and so our job isn't to be a jerk about it. Our job is to say, well, could I take a moment and explain to you my approach to this and why I think it's going to be really good for you. So you're asking permission to speak your knowledge, and there's kind of this sweet spot between over proving, where you kind of do it too much, and to just sort of expressing what needs to be expressed and then stopping and allowing questions. So that's sort of the constellation of things that I see and help folks navigate, because ultimately, businesses can only grow to the capacity of the owner. So 100%. We have to build the owner.
100% that's true. I'm interested because you've talked about team dynamics a lot. Do you have a certain sort of like author you try to read or sort of structure? Like for instance, for me, the first time I started reading and listening to like Patrick Lencioni, who wrote 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, The Table Group, like he's one of those guys who's kind of pioneered some of the thinking of like the toxicity, the dysfunction, helping create those dynamics. Are there one, is that someone you also would identify with, but are there others that you also look to help kind of fill in some of that context?
Yes, absolutely. So I love Patrick Lencioni's work, and the 5 Dysfunctions of the Team was my introduction, and then there's the 5 Dysfunctions of a CEO, and the Ideal Team Player, Hungry, Humble, and Smart. Just really, really great frameworks. John Maxwell, amazing. I actually I love to attend like free webinars, just like to see like what are people putting out there. And I've attended several of John Maxwell's free webinars, and they always do like a giveaway, and I won one.
Oh yeah,
it was so cool.
That's awesome.
So I got one of his top recruit, kind of somebody who's like really shouldered up to him to come and work with my team for 2 days. It was so cool.
So cool.
And then we ended up hiring them to work with us a little bit. So John Maxwell was great. John Gordon, the Energy Bus. We read the Energy Bus every single year. So we have the new people read it, and then the vets are rereading it. Some of us are on like our 6th time reading it. And we work the 10 rules, and they're just so simple. Like no energy vampires. You're the driver of your own bus. I'm a big believer in the 4 Agreements. That's a phenomenal book. Very, very short. Very, very to the point. And as I said earlier, I'm a yogi, so I teach yoga and I study yoga philosophy. So I'm very much steeped in this idea that our experience is always going to be better if we introspect, become more self-aware, and work on ourselves. Stop worrying about what everybody else is doing. Worry about what you're doing, and notice. And we teach that. Brene Brown, we did.
She's incredible.
What's the book? The leader, the one for
Daring now I'm
Dare to Lead.
Yeah, Dare to Lead. I was like, that's the one.
Daring Greatly was one, but Dare to Lead was really good. And then we did the workbook. You can download a workbook and you can work through that. So I really believe that in order to get better, we've got to become a master of ourselves, and that's a lifelong journey.
But that's also, it's a lifelong journey. Yes. A friend of mine, Stephen Christopher, he's with Wit Digital. We've had him on the show before, but one of the things I've learned to appreciate him in our friendship is he's so intentional about being mindfulness and being fully present. And one of the points that he always likes to make, like we'll go and grab wine or a scotch or something, and we'll just talk and try to solve life's problems, right? And in those conversations, he'll always like allude to the fact that people are uncomfortable doing that work with themselves because A, it's difficult, but B, sometimes it's scary because you have to give yourself the space to have really difficult conversations, face insecurities. And most people, especially I would argue in our society, want to fill themselves with noise. Like hit all the dopamine things all the time, like make all the money you can, do all the fast cars you can, do all the extreme things you can, so you don't have to be alone with yourself. And I love how intentional he is about creating space to be present with yourself. He does it with his team. He does it with his clients. And I hear so many sort of like those sort of influences with you too, of like, the more you can know yourself, the more you can manage yourself, the more you can be fully present in the things you do. And you'd probably agree that when you do that, when you're able to make those sort of moves and decisions, the work you do feels more meaningful. The people you surround with feel more meaningful. Everything has more value to you because you're choosing them and you're controlling them versus just reacting to them and trying to stuff your mind with things that feel passive and cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to add to that. That was beautiful. I think, this idea of put your head down and work is pervasive in the trades, right? It's just do your work, just work harder, just work, put your head down, do the work. The problem is it's external, and we've got to take that same kind of, I could do this, and do it internally. And, a big reason why this became important to me was because, I grew up in a kind of a scary household. I grew up, just everything was rough and tumble. Everything, and contractors, were yelly and mean, and there weren't any women out there, and and so the way to deal was to just become thicker skinned and more abrasive and talk like a truck driver and just self protect. And that, the way of the 80s, kind of when I got into the world of trade work, it's just kind of soul crushing after a while. And I think that everything you just said is so beautiful because it suggests that if we do that scarier work, we will have a better experience. And I think, again, normalizing things like face planting, because that's going to happen, normalizing things like making a stupid decision and going, oh, that probably was done out of awareness or out of awareness or with fear.
Yeah.
And then realizing that I think John Maxwell says fail forward. To say I'm never going to fail is to set yourself up to fail. To say, if I fail, I'm going to take a big step forward and figure out why did that happen, correct, aim again, and do better the next time. And having that done without any shaming or blaming is important. And you have to teach your team that, right? Because if somebody on your team makes a boo-boo, it's very easy for them to get blamed or shamed. So we have to turn that around and go, okay, not a great thing that just happened. Do we know why it happened? Do we know how to prevent it?
The thing that you're pointing out, though, and I think a lot of business owners specifically forget this, is a lot of business owners got to where they are by making mistakes and learning from them, right? Like they have to screw up and go, well, I'll stop doing that. And at the same time, they want to prohibit or restrict their team from also making mistakes. Like the very thing that they learn from, they're like, no, don't learn. So it's this really unique problem. The other sort of complication that comes into it, so that's just like for teams managing people. But I think for managers leading themselves or leadership teams, I think Jeff Bezos says it well. He has this idea of like, there are two-way doors and there are one-way doors. There are some decisions you make, you can walk through the door and go, whoops, wrong door. And you can walk back out and then walk in another one. And that's perfectly okay. And there are very few decisions that are one way. Like once you walk through that door, there's no going back. So giving yourself permission, even as a leadership team, to go, there are two-way doors. Like it's not always you make a mistake, you're doomed, it's the end of the world. You can retreat, go back, redo it again. That's part of the process of scaling any business at all.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to look that up. I really like that, because you could ask yourself that question when you're in a discerning moment.
Sure.
Which is, all right, I don't really know what to do. None of my managers have called me back. This is what I think. Is this a one-way door or a two-way door? If I did it wrong, can it be fixed? And it's sort of the, am I standing in front of a bomb and trying to figure out which wire to cut?
Yeah.
Or am I really just figuring out whether, the unit goes here or over here? Like, can it, I think I love that, because I think it's like a little check and balance. Is this a one-way door or a two-way door?
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for that one.
Well, I would take the credit, but it's not mine to credit. But I'll still take the accolades. Yes, please. Monique, it has been so much fun talking to you. I love your heart. I love your passion. I love that you're moving around the world. And I love how you're thinking about building a business that impacts the world around you and your community. If somebody wants to learn more about you, talk to you, see what sort of impact you can have in their business, what is the best way for somebody to contact you?
So the best way is to email me at Monique@thelifescapecoach.com. And you can hop on my website and see what I do. I'm also on Instagram at Monique.Allen.
It was a true joy and a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for reaching out and for just having this conversation. I hope we cross paths again in this context or in the real world where we can do things. But seriously, you're a great human. Thank you for doing all the things you're doing. And it was awesome having you on.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I really, really, really had fun.
This episode was hosted by Ryan Redding, author of the book on digital marketing for plumbing and HVAC contractors, and founder of Levergy, the digital marketing solution for serious home service companies. You can subscribe to Blue Collar CEO on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit us online at BlueCollar.CEO and find us on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another awesome episode. See you soon.